And this was all outlined in 5 wills that Cecil Rhodes left. We know a little bit about one of those wills. It has made it into mainstream knowledge because it was used to create the Rhodes Scholarship. By the way, President Clinton was a Rhodes Scholar. Should not be a surprise to anyone. But the Rhodes Scholarships are known, and we think that just the means by which this benefactor, Cecil Rhodes, left a large amount of money so that worthy students could get an education. And it turns out that's not it at all. The Rhodes Scholarship was designed to be more or less a recruiting and training arm of the secret society, to look for just those young men, originally young men, now including women, who had the right characteristics, the right mindset, the right worldview, who would be recruited into this hierarchy and could be placed into important positions in the secret society. And we know about this because these wills have now been written about. I'll be quoting one of the men shortly. His name is William Stead. He was the executor of Cecil Rhodes' estate, and he wrote a book that it reveals a great deal of information about these otherwise secret wills. This organization not only was formed at the turn of the century, or the end of the 19th century, but it still exists today. And in fact has been a major historical force in all world affairs since the end of World War I. Okay? The goal of this group originally was to export the British model, the British culture, the British Empire. Cecil felt that the British had the finest legal system, the finest language, the finest culture, the finest government in the world, and it was, he felt, their obligation, noblesse oblige, to rule the world so that they could spread this wonderful culture to the rest of the world, so the ignorant masses of the world could benefit from what they had developed in England. That was his original concept, and he wanted to do it in such a way that there would be very little, if any, resentment on the parts of the populations around the world who were being benefited by this transfusion. And that's one of the reasons for the necessity of keeping everything secret. Now, that evolved very quickly after Cecil Rhodes' death. It became clear that they weren't going to quite accomplish the spread of the British Empire in that fashion. And by the time they took in their American partners from the United States, people like the Rockefellers and so forth, this goal rapidly changed away from spreading the British Empire and the British culture to creating what they called a new world order, which was a world government ruled from behind the scenes by this secret society, but based on the model of collectivism. Now, that's a word that needs to be defined continually, because it's not a popular word, not commonly understood today. But in those days, they wrote about the word, they used the word collectivism with a great deal of knowledge of exactly what it meant. Just in shorthand, I'll pass over this because that's not our topic tonight, but collectivism is a concept in which the group is considered to be more important than the individual, and that individuals and minorities, even large minorities, must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. That's one of the core concepts behind collectivism, and you'll find collectivism showing up in history in many forms. It could be called Nazism, fascism, communism, socialism, so forth. You look at all of the, maybe neo-conservatism, I don't know. You take all of these political ideologies, and you peel off those labels, and you look underneath, you find the hardcore bedrock of collectivism. That's really, they're just variants of collectivism. And so the group that was formed by Cecil Rhodes was very clear that they wanted to create a world order, a world government based on the model of collectivism. It was not a world government based on the model of peace and prosperity and brotherhood and freedom. No, it was based on the model of collectivism, total government regulation and control for your own good, of course, and for our own good. And that's the model that they became the primary moving force behind this organization. Now, the methods Very important to understand the method by which they hoped to accomplish this. Not to be done by guns, not to be done by invading armies. It was to be done through infiltration of the power centers of society. It was to be done not by large numbers of people, but a very small group of people in the secret society who would consciously go into the power centers of society, move to the top, and lead the masses through the organizations to which they belong. The political parties, government agencies, church organizations, labor unions, media centers, corporations, you name it. You know, people have a herd instinct. We move together, we flock together, we have leaders, we have opinion leaders. And the masses are always flocking around their leaders. And so Cecil Rhodes and his companions knew this, and they were very wise to choose a strategy which said, we don't need to control the masses one by one. All we need to do is capture control of the organizations of the masses. And in that fashion, we can lead with extremely small numbers behind the scenes. That is the method by which they have been accomplishing their goal. Now the structure, very interesting. This is where it really gets off the wall. The structure that they chose was modeled directly after Adam Weishaupt's Illuminati, of all things. Now we are told today that the Illuminati doesn't exist. I don't know whether it does or not. If it does, it may or may not have historical continuity back to the original, which was formed in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt. You know, it was supposedly disbanded in Bavaria a few years later. The Bavarian police raided the home of one of the high dignitaries of the Illuminati, and they captured all of the personal papers written by the dignitaries and by Adam Weishaupt. And these are now, I believe, in the London Museum, or the London Library, the British Library. And so a researcher can go there and read these things, and I've read copies of them. And I was just amazed when I was reading through Cecil Rhodes' information to find out that Cecil Rhodes had copied the structure that Adam Weishaupt had created for his Illuminati. Now, does that mean there's a connection? No. It just means that obviously, I think it's obvious that Cecil Rhodes had read the same papers I did and said to himself, this is a good idea. But what is this structure? Weishaupt called it rings within rings within rings. And what he meant by that was that the people involved in this secret group were not to be aware that they were being directed by a smaller group, a smaller wing inside the outer ring. And he said that, for example, the leaders of the group should be the founder and maybe one or two of the brain trust. They would be at the hardcore center, perhaps the all-seeing eye, you might say. But around them, they would build a slightly larger group of people, maybe 80 or 100 people or 200 people, who would think that they were the whole enchilada. They would not know that there were three running the show from the inside, and they were not supposed to know. Maybe eventually some of the more astute ones would be allowed to know that, and they would be recruited into the center, but most of them would not ever know in their whole lifetime. Then that group would create around itself another ring, much larger in number, perhaps several thousand people. And they would think that they were the whole show, too, not realizing that there were a smaller group on the inside controlling them. And finally, that larger ring would create another one which would reach out into mass organization with truly large numbers of people. And for sure, most of those people would never dream in their wildest imaginations that their whole structure was being directed from rings within rings within rings. And that is exactly the formula that Cecil Rhodes chose. Now, the result of this strategy and these goals is that this organization remains invisible. Now, part of that is because of its strategy, but the other part is most intriguing to me, and that is that this group never had a name. It does not have a name today. That's part of their strategy. If you don't have a name, it's pretty hard to talk about it. Isn't it?